On the edge of the Peak District in Derbyshire lies the village of Cromford. It was here in 1771 that Richard Arkwright developed the first water-powered cotton mill, a pivotal moment in British history which heralded the Industrial Revolution. Now this proud manufacturing past forms part of a World Heritage Site and is a magnet for tourists all year round.
Cromford is it's a very tight-knit community. That's one of the things I would definitely say. Everybody kind of knows each other. There's a very sort of family feel there, a very sort of welcoming feel.
It's a very compact village and it's full of interesting shops. It's got a marvellous bookshop. There's the community centre. There's always something happening there.
Tourism is a major reason for the village being prosperous. If it were just our own 1,600 people, we couldn't keep all the services going that we do manage to keep here.
Well, it's got everything, I think. You know, garages, it's got pubs, it's got cafes, paper shop, it's got the lot, really.
Tourists were out walking in this picturesque part of the world on the 17th of September 2009 when they made a gruesome discovery.
Yeah, you need police and ambulance. We're at Cromford Station. Right, yeah. And there's a minicab in the middle of the road, and it looks like there's a body dumped into the back. There's lots of blood. There's a man, he's in the boots, there's loads of blood. Is it a male or a female? It's a male. Male body? Yeah, I can't feel any pulse or anything like that. I'm feeling his arm. When you say there's lots of blood, where's the blood coming from? I can see his head. He wears glasses. I see a load of blood around his head. Can you do me a big favour? Yeah. A lot of police are travelling to you, an ambulance travelling to you. Can you keep everybody away from that vehicle till they get to you? I will do, yeah. Thanks very much. Somebody will be very shortly, OK?
The 999 call had come from Cromford Station, which is 3/4 of a mile from the centre of the village.
Cromford train station is so rural, so secluded that if you drove past, you probably wouldn't even notice that it was there. It's a small road off a country lane, off a main road. So it doesn't get a lot of traffic apart from people that know that it's there.
Police and paramedics were immediately dispatched to the scene to seal off the area and examine the body.
They did check for signs of life, you know, and that's what you would expect. And but in actual fact, it was quite obvious that he was dead at that time.
Minutes later, a train from Derby pulled into the station.
I looked out the window and noticed first that there was some police tape covering the steps that led up to the car park. Set the alarm bells ringing. Why would there be police tape? Then looked out the window again and saw that there was a taxi parked in a strange position, really. Then noticed an arm just draped out of the back of the taxi. So you knew straight away that whoever was in the back of that car was dead.
The details that we got early on were very basic, as is often the case when dealing with the police, because only certain information is needed to pass to the press at that stage.
What the police didn't release to the press was that the victim in the boot of the taxi had been shot twice in the head by a .22 rifle. The first thing the police had to do was to try to identify the victim.
We knew it was a taxi, we knew who the taxi company was, we knew who the drivers were, so it was reasonably easy to identify who he was.
The victim was 43-year-old Stuart Ludlam, a local taxi driver, a lifelong Derbyshire resident, and the much-loved eldest son of Mum Sheila.
He loved to be on the farm. He played football. He played football for one or two teams, and he was a big fan of Derby County. He was larger than life. He was a very, very jolly person. He was my son, but he was also my friend.
Stuart had worked for local cab company MJ Taxis for 15 years under boss Tracy.
Could you pick up for my clock, please, Mick? He was helpful, kind, funny. He was a good taxi driver and everybody liked him. He was lovely.
Stuart wasn't only a hard worker, he was also a devoted family man. husband to wife Paula and father to 3 children.
All he ever talked about was his wife and his children. He didn't go out drinking with his mates and spending his money on his beer and his mates. It all revolved around his family, Stuart did. It all revolved around his family and his children.
So it begged the question, who on earth would want to kill such a popular local man?
Stuart had no enemies that I knew about. He was just a big soft lad.
It hurt a lot of people for someone so popular and someone so loved to have been taken from them in this way.
What had he done to somebody to have deserved that?
The tranquil peace of the village of Cromford in Derbyshire was shattered on the 17th of September 2009, when local taxi driver Stuart Ludlam was found shot dead in the boot of his own cab.
It was very, very shocking. It was something that you would expect to see in a film. The execution of a taxi driver by a gunman who hadn't been found.
You know, it's happened in our backyard, so to speak. It was terrible.
People just, you know, says, well, taxi driver's been murdered, and next thing I knew his father and mother very well.
But Stuart went to work as usual on that Thursday morning. His bosses, Tracy and Mick, weren't working that day, so Stuart was running the cab firm.
We was going to a funeral, so I diverted the phone to Stuart that morning and said if anyone needed to get me, they would not be able to get me till after 1 o'clock, till I came out of the funeral.
Stuart took calls from customers as well as driving his cab that day. His taxi was seen at nearby Matlock taxi rank at 10:30 a.m. Later that morning, Stuart was back at the taxi base when he got a call from someone wanting a cab down at Cromford Station.
Hello, taxi. Oh, Cromford Station. Yeah, I can be with you in 5 minutes, mate. No worries. Yeah, see ya.
Stuart immediately left the base and headed off on the 2-mile journey to the station. This was to be the last journey Stuart would ever make. When Tracy turned on her phone over an hour later after coming out of her friend's funeral, she'd received a message from the taxi firm's mechanic.
Said they'd been trying to get hold of Stuart. His phone was switched off and he wasn't answering the mobile, which doesn't happen. He always used to answer it within a couple of rings. There was something wrong, really wrong.
Tracy immediately tried to get hold of Stuart on her way home from the funeral.
I kept ringing it myself, no answer, dead. Kept ringing. It's dead again, Mick, this phone. Something seriously wrong. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know what to do. Then I radioed him when we got near a radio. Fail. That means it's switched off or damaged or something. Can't you get him?
Can't get him, it's dead, can't hear it.
Well, what's happening?
It's not there, I don't know.
Couldn't work out what was wrong, so we thought he must have either had a smash and he was in a ditch, or he'd had a heart attack. That was the only 2 things we could have put it down to.
In fact, Tracy was so worried about Stuart, she called Derbyshire Police herself and reported him missing.
His phone's dead, his radio's switched off. We just don't know what to do. Told them what registration number the car was and what colour and how long roughly he'd been missing. And that was left with the police.
And by now, Stuart's mum was also trying to get hold of him.
I phoned him and left a message on his phone. I said, Stuart, it's your mum. Phone me. But of course, there was no phone call back.
Minutes later, the taxi firm's mechanic called Tracy back with news that something had happened at Cromford Station.
Hey up, Anthony. You're joking. Within 5 minutes, Anthony rung back and said they'd found a body in a taxi at Cromford Station.
Tracy and Mick headed straight there, fearing the worst.
Well, we knew it was very, very serious because all the forensics were there. You couldn't get up there. You could see the taxi, but nobody'd let you near it, so we knew... Well, we didn't know what to think. We just knew it was more than a smash or an heart attack.
Meanwhile, Stuart's mum Sheila had gone shopping in nearby Matlock.
We could hear all the sirens, and it got my mother-in-law with me, and I stood and I said, oh, hark at them sirens, and she said, oh, come on, it's nothing to do with us.
Sheila didn't know that her son was now dead and lying in the boot of his taxi, but she soon got wind that something terrible had happened.
Somebody said that there'd been an incident at Cromford while my stomach started churning.
It was later that day, when the police had established the victim in the taxi was Stuart, that they called the family together to break the tragic news.
John, his dad, was in the fields. Somebody fetched him and we went straight down. And the police was there and they told us that what had happened. And it was terrible. Terrible.
Up at Cromford Station, the police had begun the task of investigating the crime scene.
The first things that struck you around the murder scene was the fact that it was extremely unusual. It was in a location where you wouldn't expect. There was a body in the car. You know, this doesn't happen very often at all, and I guess nationally it doesn't happen, but certainly not in Derbyshire. One of the challenges around rural locations is there is a distinct lack of CCTV. If you go into a city environment or an urban environment, there's quite often CCTV, but there is that availability of evidential opportunities, and that's the real challenge around rural locations.
Tony and his team had their work cut out trying to establish exactly how Stuart was killed. And down in Cromford, the mood of the village was about to change forever.
As the details started to emerge that afternoon, the shock that we tapped into from people was very raw and very genuine as word started to spread about the actual nature of the incident and what had gone on there.
Who was it? Who did it? It was so local, it was on our doorstep.
You don't expect it here. OK, in a city you do, but not round these parts. I think everybody knows everybody, and no, you just don't expect it.
Sheila and Stuart's wife Paula made a public appeal, hoping that someone out there could help police catch Stuart's killer.
If anybody knows anything about it, please come forward and let us know.
The police started looking into Stuart's life. As with any investigation, those closest to the victim were among the first to be interviewed.
I think one of the things that strikes you as part of a murder investigation, and statistically it'll show that 90% is murders are committed by somebody that is known to the individual, and that there has to be a reason, there has to be a motive behind it.
The police interviewed his work colleagues, as they were some of the last people to be in contact with Stuart.
I didn't know why they was asking me all these questions about how long he'd worked for us and where we'd been, and I just didn't know why they was asking me all these questions.
Sadly, in the very early stages, we have to suspect everybody because we can't say, well, no, it's definitely this person or definitely that person, because we just don't know. So everybody is viewed with an element of suspicion.
But I really did think we'd be getting into trouble for something that we knew nothing about. In fact, I actually thought I was going to get set up with a murder. That's how bad it was.
While colleagues and family were being interviewed, other inquiries gave the police their first lead.
One of the first things that we found, and it was we found a witness who'd seen a yellow cab, or they said they'd seen a yellow cab very near to the scene at around the right time. And yellow cabs are used by Derby taxi drivers. It's part of the city, it's the city colours.
Stuart was a taxi driver based in Matlock, and there was a rumour flying around that there was a rival taxi company from elsewhere in Derbyshire, and that there'd been a dispute between Stuart and one of their drivers, and that this may have been retribution to do with that.
The police investigated this rumour, hoping it would uncover Stuart's killer.
We started to trace a lot of the taxi drivers, a lot of the taxis, and there are hundreds of those in the city. Initially we started to look at that, but as things progressed we kind of moved away from that area.
The taxi feud proved to be nothing more than a red herring, but there was other gossip flying around the community.
There was a lot of rumours. There was rumours that I was having an affair with Stuart and Mick had him murdered. There was rumours that he was involved with drugs. There was rumours that it was racial. There was loads of rumours. It was awful.
One of the things that we did very early on was try and establish, Stuart, whether he got involvement with drugs, with blackmail, with robberies, and that kind of stuff, any criminal elements to his life, any people that would hold a grudge against him, etc. And there wasn't anybody, and there was no obvious motive coming out.
With nothing to the gossip, few leads for the police to go on, and no suspect yet arrested, the local community was living in fear that there was a killer on the loose who might strike again.
Well, I think it was, people were frightened that there was a murderer somewhere knocking about in a village like, who was it?
It was a nervous time, and you were still talking to people, but it wasn't as open as it used to be. It seemed to just make everybody a little bit more wary of situations, so to speak.
When such a brutal murder has happened and nobody has been arrested, there's always going to be that fear there, and that was definitely felt by the people of those villages.
And the taxi drivers themselves were also worried when going about their daily work.
When I was driving, if I had a car following me for more than a couple of miles, I'd turn off. I'd be looking through my mirror all the time, and I'd turn off and go a different way. I got a bit paranoid for a short while, for a few weeks, months even.
You didn't feel safe with drivers right there, and a nutter on loose.
Keen to move the investigation on and put the villagers' fears to rest, Derbyshire Police looked into other lines of inquiry.
One of the questions that we asked very early on was, how did Stuart get to that particular location? It wasn't a taxi rank, so he had to be drawn in for some particular reason. So we were able to look at the telephone calls into the taxi company. We were able to identify the last call made to him.
The police needed to uncover the identity of the mystery caller who'd summoned Stuart to the station.
It was on a particular phone, and we were able to trace that phone.
With the cooperation of the mobile phone company, the police uncovered where the phone in question had been bought. It was purchased in cash from Morrison's supermarket in Derby.
Unfortunately, it was a pay-as-you-go, and unfortunately there were no records of who'd purchased it.
Unable to link the phone to a name, the police's only lead into Stuart's murder had stalled, and there was a danger that they'd never catch whoever killed him. The police investigating the murder of Derbyshire taxi driver Stuart Ludlam were trying to trace the owner of the pay-as-you-go mobile phone that was used to lure him to Cromford Station.
Oh, Cromford Station? Yeah, I can be with you in 5 minutes, mate, no worries. Yeah, see ya.
Officers had uncovered that the phone involved had been bought from a supermarket in Derby.
When we identified that the phone had been purchased in Morrison's, we went to have a look at where it had been purchased, and we were able to identify that it was been paid for in cash. It was £9.99.
If detectives could identify who owned this phone, it could be a vital step towards finding Stuart's killer.
We knew roughly the time that it had been purchased, and we also found out that it had been topped up at Morrison's petrol station.
The top-up meant there could be another payment linked to the phone, and police hoped that this might give them a name.
But unfortunately, the officers that went couldn't find any records of that topping up. And that just didn't seem right. There had to be some record. We knew it had been topped up there.
Trusting his instincts as a seasoned investigator, Tony sent his officers back to the garage, convinced that there must be some record of the top-up payment. And after digging through the sales records once more, police uncovered that one customer had topped up their phone after filling up their car.
We found out that it had been topped up, but on the back of a purchase of petrol. So £20 of petrol, £5 top-up had been paid, the £25 on a credit card.
Unearthing this credit card payment was a major breakthrough for Tony and his team.
The first thing about having somebody using a credit card is you've clearly got an identity of an individual. And, you know, we went through some banking records, and I remember it was on Saturday, and we were able to get some information very quickly about who the account belonged to.
The account belonged to someone called Colin Cheetham. Good old-fashioned detective work and analysis of modern data records had moved the investigation forward. Now the police needed to know who Colin Cheetham was. Did he have links to Stuart, or a motive to kill him?
Well, clearly once we got a name from the credit card company, we were able to start doing some background checks on him.
The police checked his name on their systems, and on the National Firearms Database they made a match. They discovered a photograph of Colin and uncovered information about his connection with guns.
He had access to .22 caliber weapons, and it was a .22 weapon that had killed Stuart.
Now, with an image of Colin to hand, police used this in their investigation and cross-checked CCTV which they'd earlier obtained from the supermarket on the day the phone was bought.
We took his photograph on the National Firearms Database and compared it with CCTV footage at Morrison's at the time the phone was purchased, and Colin Cheetham was in Morrison's at that time.
The police now had evidence linking Colin to the phone's purchase, and they also had the credit card evidence linking him to the later top-up. Investigators now needed to question Colin Cheetham as a matter of priority.
It was quite easy to realise and recognise that he was a prime suspect, and as a consequence we needed to speak to him. We had to go in and arrest him. We went in and searched his house and brought him down to the police station and interviewed him over a number of days.
While the investigation into Stuart's killing was making good progress, the local community was mourning his loss. Stuart's colleagues and fellow taxi drivers came together to honour their murdered friend.
The taxi drivers, Stuart's colleagues, and drivers from other firms that didn't work with Stuart but knew him, they all united in a tribute to him in the weeks after his death. I think there was a parade. They also did a sounding of their horns. In place of a minute's silence, there was a minute sounding of the horns, which I think sort of crystallised how popular he was.
They all peeped the horns for a minute, and there was loads of people in there. There was hundreds of them, hundreds of people in there, just to honour him for what sort of person he was, really.
It was a very joyous, I shall say, more than a sad thing, to know that he was well respected.
The next day, the 27th of September 2009, just 10 days after Stuart was killed, the police arrested Colin Cheetham and proceeded to interview their prime suspect under caution.
I think when we first got Colin Cheetham into the police station, it was quite apparent that he was a very controlling individual, and he tried to control the interviews. So if my officers asked him a question, he would then ramble on about all sorts without answering the question. But actually, ultimately, that was probably his undoing, because he gave far more information that he should have done. So as an example, when we confronted him with a piece of evidence to suggest that he'd been at the crime scene, he said, "Oh yes, I had been at the crime scene, and I'd seen the body, I'd seen the arm, and I'd seen that he'd been shot in the head." Well, actually, you couldn't physically see that. You know, we didn't know that until we actually took Stuart out of the car. We didn't know how he'd been killed. So for somebody to be able to say that, they had to have an intimate knowledge of what had happened.
Not only did Colin reveal information only police knew about the murder, he also let slip vital information about his own spending habits.
There were some real significant throwaway comments that he made in interview, which when we went back and reviewed it, were explained an awful lot about him. So as an example, he said anything under £10 he always paid for in cash. Anything over £10 he always paid for on a credit card. So the purchase of the phone was under £10, it was £9.99. So he paid cash. Of course, when he topped it up, it was with £20 worth of petrol, so he paid for it on a credit card.
Colin was tripping himself up under interview, and now the police concentrated on looking into his movements on the day of Stuart's murder.
One of the key things that we wanted to do was link Colin to the scene. We knew he'd been to the scene, but what time had he gone, and, you know, what time had he come away, and did they fit in with the time scale of when Stuart was murdered? We were able to identify a number of pieces of CCTV along the route that he would have taken. I mean, that's one of the beauties of a rural location, I suppose, is there is only ever a limited number of ways you can get back to where you want to be if it's a pre-planned murder. So we knew he would have had to go one of 3 ways, and we trawled along those routes. We found quite a bit of CCTV, and actually when we sat down and reviewed it, we were able to pick out a car which was exactly the same as Colin's, but we couldn't say it was his. But of course we had a vehicle expert who reviewed it and looked at it, and again gave very strong evidence to say that it was very probable that it was the same car.
It wasn't just the evidence of Colin's whereabouts on the day of the murder that pointed to his guilt.
One of the things we tried to do was do as much searching of his property whilst he was still in custody, because of course we could put what we found to him in interview, you know, whilst he was still with us. And we found a number of things. So we found he got a number of cameras, and when we sort of very quickly looked through the photographs on the cameras, there was photographs of the railway station. So there was a photograph of Ambergate Railway Station, of Wirksworth and of Cromford, which did seem a little bit odd. But when we put that to him, he said he was making a calendar up for somebody that he knew that liked railways, which it still didn't seem right, you know, because there was he didn't have a computer, he wasn't able to make a calendar, but he'd taken these photographs. And then he got a photograph of the timetable at Cromford, the rail timetable. And he'd also got photographs of the taxi calling cards, which are at the reception or the entrance to the railway station. He'd taken photographs of that. So they were things that we were able to interview him about.
But there was more chilling evidence to come. The police uncovered the extent of Colin Cheetham's obsession with firearms.
We found numerous photographs of him posing with guns in a very kind of arrogant and violent manner almost. We also knew that he'd used weapons abroad, and you know, we knew he'd been to gun clubs abroad. So it was a fascination for him, but obviously it turned out to be you know, a fascination that had gone too far. I think as an investigator, you have a real feeling whether you've got the right person, and certainly after a few hours in custody, I felt, as did the officers interviewing, that he was responsible. He was involved in the murder.
With a mounting weight of evidence against Colin Cheetham, the police charged him with the murder of Stuart Ludlam.
When the police told us that somebody had been arrested and charged with Stuart's murder, there was a real sense of relief that came from the community. There was a real sense of kind of progress, that this killer had been caught, and I think Some of that fear that the community had felt started to ebb away slightly.
It was a relief, and everybody, it lifted that cloud.
Well, I felt sort of pleased, I did. You know, thought, well, they've caught somebody's done a good job in catching them.
It came across the bottom of the telly that he'd been charged with the murder, and me and Mick was both jumping up and flying around the front room screaming and shouting.
But the relief that someone had been charged with Stuart's murder was tinged with the shocking revelation that Colin Cheetham was in fact a local man who lived on the outskirts of the Derbyshire town of Ripley.
It came to light that when I was younger, he, in actual fact, lived a few doors away from me growing up. But at first, when they said Colin Cheetham, it didn't ring a bell with me.
Despite Colin Cheetham having been arrested and charged, the strain took its toll on Sheila.
I hope I never have to go through it again, because it was awful. I never slept, I never ate, for quite a while. It really, really was terrible.
The weight of evidence may have led the police to charge Colin Cheetham with Stuart's murder, but what no one could make sense of at this stage is what made him commit such a terrible crime. The trial of Colin Cheetham for the murder of Stuart Ludlam began on the 14th of June 2010 at Nottingham Crown Court.
The atmosphere in court when Colin was in the dock was it was very icy to begin with. He was behind this glass wall, but seeing him there, I think for the family, for the first time, to actually see this man in the flesh was very emotional, and that didn't go away throughout the 2-week trial.
I couldn't believe it. He was a big guy, could hardly walk about. I just couldn't stop looking at him. I just couldn't take my eyes off him all the time I was there. I just couldn't take my eyes off him.
The prosecution laid out their case that Colin Cheetham had set out to kill that September day. He had no personal motive against Stuart and would have murdered whoever had answered his call and turned up at the station.
There is no doubt in my mind that Colin Cheetham set out to kill somebody because he wanted to know what it felt like. The only way he could lure somebody to kill them was to actually draw somebody into an area, and a taxi would be an obvious choice.
You can have a cab at Cromford Station, please.
Oh, Cromford Station? Yes, mate, I'll be with you as soon as I can, thank you.
Yeah, as quick as you can.
Very sadly, Stuart was the person that answered the call and attended the railway station.
Stuart was in the wrong place at the wrong time and drawn at random to be killed.
Stuart might have been a randomly chosen victim, but there had been nothing random about the extent Colin Cheetham had gone to prepare to kill.
The true extent of Colin Cheetham's pre-planning of the murder became apparent during the trial, and it was very, very shocking. The lengths to which he'd gone to try and not be caught, I think, was the key. It seemed that he wanted to murder someone and get away with it and never be caught, and he'd gone to a lot of effort to try and make that come true.
He'd been up there, he'd tested his mobile phones, he'd taken photographs, he knew where to park, the selection of that particular railway station, and significantly at that particular time, because there was a gap in the amount of trains that travelled the route at that time, he'd set it up to commit the perfect murder.
Colin had planned the murder in fine detail, right down to finding a time when there were no trains due at Cromford Station. So when Stuart was heading down there in his taxi, he was only moments away from certain death.
He drove up into the railway station. He turned around at the top and obviously didn't see anybody there and started to come back down the station approach. Now, he was either stopped because Colin was stood in the road or Colin flagged him down.
Get out! Now!
He's then made him get out of the car to go round to the back of the car.
Move! Rope back!
Easy, man, easy.
Open boot!
No!
He's made him get into the car.
Garrick boot!
There is no doubt that Stuart was executed. People say, well, he was murdered, he wasn't executed. Well, he was executed. This was a cold-blooded, get somebody out the front of the car, walk them to the back, put them in the boot, and then shoot them whilst they knelt in the boot. It was callous, cold, and incredibly distressing, really.
I just couldn't stop thinking then about Stuart, what actually happened that day. What did Stuart have to go through? What was he going through? How long did he keep him there before he actually killed him? Hopefully he did it quick so he didn't have long to suffer.
I sat through every day. There was only one day that I left the courtroom, and that was when they was reading out Stuart's injuries and what he'd done to him. And I couldn't sit in then. I had to come out.
But Colin Cheetham pleaded not guilty to the murder charge against him.
Colin Cheetham's defence was very wild. It seemed to be composed in parts of the rumours that were flying about in those early stages of the murder investigation, in the weeks directly after the murder.
In fact, he had his own version of events leading up to Stuart's killing.
Colin Cheetham's alibi was that he had been dragged into this robbery gone wrong by two people who he named as Stan and Jeff. No surnames, no addresses, no locations for them at all, but he was an unwilling party in what turned out to be a murder. He provided a gun. He said he didn't shoot the gun. It just seemed very desperate, very wild.
The police had investigated Colin's alibi in great detail and had tried to find Stan and Jeff.
We knew, he said he met them in a particular pub. He said one of them was a plumber. And so we did a lot of work. We interviewed everybody in the pub, if they knew a Stan or a Jeff. We interviewed all the builders merchants in the area to find out if they knew a plumber called Stan or Jeff. And of course all that was negative, and it was quite obvious that he'd made it up. And because it was such a ludicrous story and so unbelievable, nobody would believe it, and clearly the jury didn't believe it.
Not only had Colin's alibi been shown to be false, but the court also heard evidence linking him to the murder scene. The gun that killed Stuart has never been found, but the ammunition used in the murder matched the kind used by Colin.
We recovered firearm casings from a rifle range that he used, a gun club that he used, so we knew he'd been in possession of the murder weapon. He said he'd given it to some other people, but it was a load of nonsense, and we showed it was a load of nonsense. And I think that's one of the really key things about investigations for homicide, is you have to go to that nth degree to pick up all that detail to make sure that you've got a very successful case.
And that level of detail included the search of Colin's home, which threw up more forensic evidence.
On one fleece, a green zip-up fleece-type jacket, we found some blood which linked to the car. So that was the forensic evidence, some forensic evidence that put him to the crime scene.
Not only that, they had the CCTV from the supermarket, the credit card transaction linking Colin to the phone used to call Stuart, and the jury also saw the CCTV of Colin's car travelling to Cromford Station.
It was clear to me that the evidence was mounting up against Colin Cheetham during the trial, and there was a lot of forensic evidence, a lot of expert testimony that really did point one way.
He denied it right to the very end. It wasn't very nice seeing him there because he stood there and he got no remorse. He couldn't care less that he'd ruined our lives. He'd no remorse at all, no remorse.
On the 29th of June 2010, Colin Cheetham was found guilty of Stuart's murder.
Throughout the court, he never showed an ounce of emotion, expression. It was always a particular way he looked, and he maintained that throughout. And even to the point where he was found guilty and sentenced to his term of imprisonment, he never showed any emotion.
Colin was sentenced to life imprisonment for what he'd done to Stuart. It was one slip-up in his planning of the murder that had led the police to his door.
I think Cheetham genuinely thought he'd got away with the murder. And it was only when the police discovered that a credit card had been used for a pay-as-you-go phone that was part of his meticulous planning that it all fell down around him.
It was his compulsive behaviour which led to that downfall. If it hadn't have been for that one mistake that he made, but obviously that we found, my professional judgment would have been that we wouldn't have linked him to the murder.
And in a chilling twist, Colin had revealed to police in interview that in the weeks preceding Stuart's death, he'd ordered another taxi and taken it to a rural spot.
We managed to track that taxi driver down, and what it appeared was that, and I believe it was almost a dry run, and as he was getting out of the taxi, he started to fumble in his jacket. I do believe that he had the gun with him at that time, and I wouldn't have been surprised if he was going to try and kill him then. Now, something put him off, and I don't know what it is, and we'll never know what it is. You know, perhaps a car came past, perhaps he lost his bottle, whatever it was, but he didn't do anything then. But what it demonstrated, and I think what he was able to take from that was, I can actually do this now. And as cold and as callous as that sounds, it almost gave him the confidence to go on and commit another one. He killed Stuart Ludlam because he wanted to know what it felt like to kill somebody. And I think had he done it once, he'd have done it again and again and again, and he would have undoubtedly become a serial killer.
And for Stuart's colleagues, although his murderer was now behind bars, the randomness of the attack still played on their minds.
If we hadn't been in the funeral, it definitely would have been my husband.
It could have been me. But it could have been anybody.
Fortunately, the police had stopped Colin Cheetham before he was able to kill again, and ultimately justice was served.
I was pleased that he had got locked away, and it would be life, definitely. He'll not be able to come out and do anything again, at all.
But everyone in the close community of Cromford has been touched by Stuart's untimely death.
Well, no, there's not a day goes by when somebody don't mention Stuart. There's not a day, and some of the old people, I mean, they still get in my car now and cry.
They still talk about it today. Some people do, you know, because it's not long ago.
They've had closure. That was the main thing. At least somebody was responsible.
He'll never be forgotten. Never, ever. No. There'll be lots of people still that can tell you some tales about Stuart. Happy tales.